Hey, I'm Trey. This story is about a boy's anger that became a man's anger and which caused the deaths of dozens. If you enjoy more stories such as these, I upload new content every Tuesday and Thursday. Also, if you have any comments or suggestions or questions, please leave them in the comment section. Just an FYI in advance, none of the victims' names were provided in any of the incidents. So if you're ready, let's get started. A young boy by the name of Jose Ra was born in the country of Brazil sometime in the early 1950s to his parents who were not named but poor. No public records could be found of his date of birth or any names of his relatives. Based on Jose's testimony, his mother saw him and treated him as a mistake. Jose's mother was a prostitute who became pregnant by his father unintentionally, as he paid to have sex with her. As Jose became an older juvenile, he became fixated on having an imaginary life, not including his biological parents for obvious reasons. He would daydream about being a part of a family. He initially would feel good about his daydreams, but when he would come back to reality, it increased his resentment for his unfortunate life. Jose turned out to be a loner and stayed to himself regularly. When Jose became curious about sex, his mother thought that she would help her son out by teaching him everything he needed to know. Either his mother had a morbid sense of humor or she was totally ignorant to what she was doing, but out of spite, Jose's mother would force him to watch her as she had sex with several of her patrons. I guess his mother wanted to do her part as a good provider. She actually thought she was doing a good job somehow. This is sick. This went on regularly for years, which caused Jose to be extremely resentful and made him despise his mother. His mother was also prone to slap Jose for the slightest transgressions. Whenever he would question her about anything, she would slap him. Whenever he didn't do as she asked correctly, she would slap Jose. I guess you all can see where he would get his respect for women from. This is what led him as a teenager to develop a love-hate relationship for girls. He liked spending time with girls, but if they did or said anything that resembled his mother's actions or mannerisms, he would become a totally different person. Jose was known to become physically abusive if any female were to ever mention or question him about his mother. Jose, during the majority of his childhood, began taking care of his father, whom he loved dearly but also pitied. His father's name was not provided, but it was known that he suffered from a severe case of leprosy. Since his mother was never around to help out with his father, Jose was forced to strip off the contaminated, infected pieces of flesh off his father's body. This kept the infection from spreading to different parts of his body. He also had to concern himself about becoming infected as well. Leprosy is highly contagious, so Jose would have to wear protective clothing and sanitize himself and the area around his father's lesions. Jose resented having to do this task, which left him feeling sick at the sight and smell of his father's rotting, infected flesh. As an adult, Jose joined the Brazilian military in order to escape his past. Shortly after joining, he was kicked out for stealing. Now broke and homeless, he found petty jobs that didn't pay much and weren't consistent. Because he was homeless, he lived a transient lifestyle until he met a woman who became his girlfriend. They eventually got a place together. Although he moved on with his life, Jose's hatred for his mother persisted. He blamed his entire life's problems and misery on his mother. Jose would sometimes fantasize about her death. One day, Jose observed a woman whose name was not provided, who he believed to be involved with the local sex trade. The woman looked a lot like his mother, which intrigued him. Jose began to have conversations with this woman. He was not interested in sex initially, but he was interested in finding out how much she had in common with his mother. During the conversation, the woman became curt and used some abrasive language towards him. Jose became enraged with this unknown woman that it triggered something within him. Instead of verbally lashing back at her, he remained calm. He then persuaded her to follow him with offerings of money and drugs. She agreed to follow him. Jose led her to an isolated location. She was never seen alive again after that point. Several days later, the unknown woman's body was found by a local resident. The body was found naked and hidden under some debris. Her face was beaten unrecognizable and her mouth was found gagged. Her legs were tied and arms were tied behind her back. Her body contained multiple injuries that consisted of bruises and lacerations. The authorities were contacted and responded. No witnesses or leads were found at the time. An autopsy on the body was done and it was determined that the woman had been tortured. That's obvious. Her body showed signs of being burned in some places and beaten with an object similar to a metal pole that left imprints on the body. She also had signs of being sodomized and raped, possibly with that object. The authorities had limited capabilities for investigating homicides, so it was downplayed to the public. Several months later, another woman who looked eerily similar to Jose's mother was reported as missing from some relatives. No names were provided. They assured the police that she was not any type of sex worker and had a part-time job as a saleswoman. The following day, a naked woman's body was located stuffed under an abandoned vehicle. When the body was removed, it was identified as the missing unnamed woman. It was determined that the woman had been dead for at least 36 hours. She was found with her legs tied, her arms tied behind her back, and with obvious signs of bruises from being beaten with an object. An autopsy was completed, and the police determined that the victim had severe internal injuries, much like the previous victim. She had been raped and sodomized with an object that likely caused the internal injuries. This monster is sick, and he should be punished in the same manner as these victims when caught. The authorities were unable to locate any leads or witnesses. The police notified the public of the possibility of a serial killer in their area, and they in turn labeled the killer as the MORUMBI monster. Over the span of 11 years, an additional 18 similar homicides were committed by the same killer, also in the same manner. Each and every one of the victims resembled the mother of Jose. The police were no closer to finding the actor due to some strange streak of luck. Jose's girlfriend notified the authorities that Jose was the killer of these victims after being questioned for an unrelated theft. Jose was arrested shortly after. He was charged, went to trial, and found guilty for 20 murders. He was then sentenced to 60 years in prison. 30 years later, Jose was set from prison and he's now a free citizen. If you enjoy stories such as these, click the suggested video above. I upload new content every Tuesday and Thursday. God bless and stay safe.